Hello everyone. Today we are looking at a post-Phantom Nightmare brew of Kashtira and Gate Guardian. Gate Guardian, for those who do not know, was a terrible but iconic card from the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime used by the Paradox Brothers in their tag duel / labyrinth duel against Yugi and Joey in Duelist Kingdom. They played a vanilla monster called Labyrinth Wall, and it turned into a literal labyrinth on the field. This was during Duelist Kingdom. If your monster said it could make a maze, it could make a maze, or was a maze in this case. So capitalizing on that nostalgia for this iconic card, who's not even actually in this deck, the original Gate Guardian is not part of this brew. Konami released Maze of Memories in 2023, and that featured a bunch of fusion retrains of Gate Guardian and some other related labyrinth monsters in an attempt to make the deck at least like remotely playable. And an attempt is probably the best way to describe this deck. It didn't like make Gate Guardian competitive, but it made it playable at like a rogue, not even rogue, like a locals level, kind of a jank thing. It works, but it's like you're still relying on these three effective vanillas from 2002, I think is when they came out in the TCG. Sangha, Suijin, and Kazugen. They're just not great cards, but we will get back to them once we kind of get to the card by card. The second half of the Abomination is Kashtira, Vsauce Lore's favorite intergalactic colonizing zone lockers, and led by the physical manifestation of Vsauce's teenage angst. He is Riseheart is not in here. There's not really a huge need for him in this deck because you can't even get into a Riseheart, and I don't find him particularly valuable otherwise. Speaking of Riseheart, without him, Kashtira is essentially a control strategy now. It's not able to just, macrocosmos your opponent and put that oppressive, condition that everything goes right to the grave. Anything that was going to the graveyard is getting banished regardless now. But they do have one thing that kind of works with Gate Guardian is that they're level 7s. All the Gate Guardians are level 7s, as is Labyrinth Heavy Tank, a new card from Maze that we'll get into again a little bit later. Kashtira, though, is still fairly bricky. It's not as bricky as the Gate Guardian half of this deck, because they all have their ability to special summon themselves, whereas like Sangha, Kazugen, and Suijin have no way to do that. Labyrinth Heavy Tank can summon himself, but the Kashtiras are definitely bricky. So you've got two decks that are bricky enough to build a pig a house. So why would you kind of play this? It's like, well, the main reason I would play this is because right now we're going into a tier 0 Snake Eye situation with Fire King, and we need to cope somehow with things that aren't, Fire King related. Enough of the Year of Fire, we're moving on to the years of Gates and Kashtiras. But yeah, I kind of already mentioned the main synergy with these two is that they're both level 7s. Or a majority of them are level 7s at the very least. So they do have that level of kind of synergy for going into rank 7 plays. The other second half of it isn't as directly related to either of them, but they're both capable of playing under Dimension Shifter, which is about as disruptive a hand trap as you can get outside of maybe Droll and Lockbird. In a format like this, it's also still quite powerful, but neither the Gate Guardian cards nor Kashtira has any issue necessarily playing under that. They don't need to use the graveyard for a whole lot. Those are kind of the two main points of synergy. Is that enough to make a deck competitive? Is it enough to make it, YCS worthy? Probably not. But that's not the point of this. The point of this is to have fun. And Phantom Nightmare did just release 2 new Gate Guardian cards, so the timing is nice. I've actually wanted to do this video for a while, but now we have good timing. So yeah, let's take a look at the card by card. So first we've got the 3 Gate Guardian materials. We got the Sangha, Suijin, and Kazugen. Even though I called them vanillas, they technically do have an effect. The effect is essentially that during damage calculation, you can reduce an attacking monster, so your opponent's attacking monster, its attack from whatever it is to 0 once per turn. Each of them could do it once, but you can use it once per turn. So it's kind of a protection effect, a little battle trick. Again, it's on your opponent's turn only, battle phase limited, and can only be used once per turn. So it's basically a vanilla. They have no way of special summoning themselves. They would require 2 tributes otherwise, but there they are in their glory, all 3 of them, right out from 2002. Another small note, if you look at Sangha right under the logo or the symbol, I believe that means thunder, but I could be wrong. He has eyes. I did not realize that when this card first came out back in 2002, that Sangha actually had eyes. I thought the faceplate thing, that's his head, was just his face. Like, I wasn't a bright child. All right. So after those 6, then you get into the first of the maze retrains. That is, Labyrinth Heavy Tank. So you can normal summon this card without tributing. It cannot attack the turn it is normal summoned. During your main phase, you can place a Sangha, Kazagen, or Suijin that is banished or in your hand or deck face up in your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. Then, if you control a Labyrinth Wall card, you can destroy one monster your opponent controls, and you can only use that effect once per turn, and that is a hard once per turn. So Tank's a big part of this whole thing. He's able to get himself on board without, tributing or any other effect. He fills the back row with material, Kazagen, Suijin, and Sangha. That back row filling is kind of how Konami essentially decided to make this archetype work, as opposed to simply retraining Sangha, Kazagen, Suijin. They kept the materials the same and said, you're going to be able to get them on field, but not via special summon. You're going to have another way of doing it. And then in this case, it's basically like placing them in the back row as continuous spells is how they chose to do it. Another fun fact about Labyrinth Heavy Tank is he's actually a retrain of Labyrinth Tank, which was a fusion monster with the same stats as him, at least attack and defense, dark, level 7. But the fun part about him is he was a fusion of Gigatech Wolf, which was just a random vanilla pack filler card, and Cannon Soldier, the FTK machine of old. Old fusions were weird. But the next is... here we go. Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth. You can discard this card, add 1 Labyrinth Wall card from your deck to your hand. At the start of the damage step, if your opponent's monster battles while you control Labyrinth Wall card, you can banish this card from your graveyard, destroy that opponent's monster, and you can only use this effect once per turn. So again, another card once per turn. You can you can only use each effect, just making sure that's clear. So for this guy, you just discard him, and you go and grab the archetypal field spell. Technically, you could also grab the old Labyrinth Wall vanilla card from 2002-ish. Why you would do that is beyond me, but if you needed a 3000 defense, 0 attack vanilla, be my guest. But basically, you're going to use him to grab Labyrinth Wall Shadow. The nice thing is he is kind of the beginning of these cards that, again, don't have a problem working under Dimension Shifter. He just needs to be discarded. He does not need to go to the graveyard. So there's that. And the nice thing is you can get rid of him. Like, he's not bricky. He's level 5, so you can't just normal summon him, but he does have an effect that you can just use to fire him off. So he does have some value. Labyrinth, the field spell is very important to the overall archetype, basically as important as the tank. The other effect is it's a battle trick. It's not mind-blowing, but it is a non-targeting destruction, so there is that. Could be useful. If you can't target a monster, well, this doesn't target. And we are finally moving on to our first Phantom Nightmare release, Dark Guardian. Dark Guardian cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned either by the effect of Dark Element or special summoned from your hand or graveyard by shuffling into the deck 1 each of Sangha, Kazagen, and Suijin that is in your hand, face-up field, graveyard, and or banished. The banished thing works with the fusions. We'll get onto that a bit later when we move on to the extra deck. It cannot be destroyed by battle, and if it's summoned by the effect of Dark Element, it is unaffected by monster effects or your opponent's activated spell or trap card effect. So it would be affected by a lingering effect, but it wouldn't be affected by a activated effect, essentially. It is also still affected by traps. But it can't be destroyed by battle. 3800 attack and defense, making him bigger than Gay Guardian. Guardian. Overall, a pretty bad brick to just draw. He's not going to do you a ton of favors. Hanging out in your hand, you really don't want to draw him. You want to be able to summon him from the deck, which I believe you can do with Dark Element, but we'll get into that later. And yeah, but otherwise, kind of a cool card. He was originally featured in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX during, again, a tag duel with the Paradox Brothers, but this time against Jaden and Cyrus in their midterm duel. And he actually has never been printed before Phantom Nightmare, despite being a 20-year-old card. Kind of an odd-looking thing, doesn't really fit with it. Like, these dudes, like, these guys are all kind of like elemental-based creatures. And then you got Dark Guardian, who's like a big dude with a claw arm, a big-ass axe, and a spider for legs. Kind of a weird mix of aesthetics there, but hey, why not? One thing that I did think about when I was kind of writing this was that I think Dark Guardian would have been great as like a big Xyz monster that could like attach. Like what you could do is the mechanic within it would allow you to special summon it using like banished Kazajin, Suijin, and Sangha as material. Basically, you could drag all these three materials from somewhere else, place them all underneath an overlay for him, and then like you could like detach an effect to like stop, like, oh, like either have like a negate, or like if it gets about to be destroyed, instead of just having the natural battle protection, detach. It would make it easier to summon him at the very least, because then he's just an extra deck monster, not a main deck monster. But that wasn't how they decided to go. And I mean, he's a common. If you buy a couple packs of Phantom Nightmare, you're probably going to get him, or you could probably buy him for like 25 cents. So, hey, and we're doing Gate Guardian. We're on theme here. So, yeah, that's it for the main deck Gate Guardian monsters. We're going to move on to the Kashtiras. We've got 3 Unicorn and 3 Fenrir and 1 Scareclaw Cash. 3 Unicorn basically are there to search for birth. The Fenrir is there because Fenrir is just good in general, can search himself, can disrupt opponents' plays with the banishment effect. Just a general useful card. Scareclaw Cash is there at 1 just because, like, if you do have a fair, like, decent number of Kashtiras here. You've got 7 monsters, 3 spells. So you do have a decent odd of maybe having, like, Scareclaw Cash, Fenrir, Unicorn, and Kashtira or an extra copy of Birth that you might not need. You can always just fire one of those off and get another level 7 body on the field. Kashtira, we're looking at spells. Kashtira Birth is in here just because essentially it's just a form of level 7 support. It's searchable by Unicorn, and yeah, that's the main thing. It's there mostly to allow you to get the Sanghas, Suijins, and Kazajins of the world onto the field. If you're like stuck with them in your hand and no other way to kind of remove them from your hand, that's a way to do it. The nice thing with that is that it also technically allows you to summon, well, not even technically, it does allow you to normal summon Labyrinth Heavy Tank without tributing, and then it doesn't impact his own ability to attack. Like, it's not summoning him via his own effect, you're summoning him via the effect of Kashtira Birth, so he can actually attack that turn. Is it going to be the end of the world or make like a huge difference? Maybe if you're pushing for lethal, but overall, that's about all you've got with that. I'm playing 1 Kashtira in here. Again, you could probably replace it with another copy of Kashtira Birth, maybe even another copy of Dark Element. It's in here because maybe you want to go into an Xyz play. Depending on where things are going, you might want to really be able to commit to having potentially a Fusion Gate Guardian monster as well as a Big Eye or a Shangri-Ira on field. And you can just do that. Once you finish your fusions, then you can go into Kashtira. The only thing about Kashtira is if you used it before, you are locking yourself into Xyz monsters, so make sure your sequencing is on point. And now we're back to Gate Guardians, or at least their related cards. This is Labyrinth Wall Shadow. The field spell says that monsters cannot attack the turn they are summoned, except for monsters with level 5 or higher, original levels, so if you have level modulation, it doesn't count. Once per turn, you can place a Sangha, Kazajin, or Suijin that is banished or in your hand or deck in the back row as a continuous spell, basically the same effect as Labyrinth Heavy Tank. And that at the start of your opponent's battle phase, you can target a monster your opponent controls with 1600 attack or less and destroy it. So again, it's going to be the main effect is going to be the ability to place a Sangha, Kazajan, or Suijin in your back row. If you can do that, along with Labyrinth Heavy Tank, you've got access to a fusion. The nice thing is, because it's placing cards in the back row, it actually cannot be ashed. The search for him via Shadow Ghoul of the Labyrinth can be ashed, but the field spell itself cannot be ashed. The destruction effect is, I mean, sure, I guess if you were playing Sprite against Sprite, maybe it would be valuable. It's not particularly like mind-blowing. The other two, yeah, and then the restriction on level 5 attacks is kind of fine. Like, it would have been cool if they had actually done it at level 7, because that kind of fits with the rest of the archetype outside of Shadow Ghoul, but you're never going to summon Shadow Ghoul, like, ever. But locking your opponent out of like attacks with anything below level 7 would actually be pretty useful. Another Gate Guardian spell is double attack Wind and Thunder, where if you control a Gate Guardian monster, target a card on the field and destroy it. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard and add a Sangha, Kazajan, or Suijin that is banished or in your deck from your hand, and you can only use that effect once per turn. So again, that's searching, placing effect. The first one can actually be used as many times as you have copies of this card, so if you happen to have 3 copies of this card and a Gate Guardian monster on the field, you can use it 3 times, the destruction effect at the very least. So that's kind of useful. Decent card. The only thing is it does require a Gate Guardian, and once you already kind of have a Gate Guardian, is the ability to retrieve a banished or Gate Guardian or one that's in your deck in your hand particularly important. Maybe it's nice to have the extra materials, because now you can create some recursion, maybe send off your first 3 to get combined, and then retrieve some of those and get either another combined or something else, some spell trap negation. But overall, worth playing at 3 in a deck like this. So, Dark Element. This is a Phantom Nightmare card, another common. This is the intended way of getting Dark Guardian on the field, but let's get into the text. If you have a Gate Guardian monster in your graveyard, you can pay half your life points, special summon 1 level 11 or higher Gate Guardian monster from your hand, deck, or extra deck, ignoring its summoning condition. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add a Sangha, Kazajan, or Suijin from your deck, or banishment to your hand. Banishment, again, referred here, I think it was referred to previously in something in Maze of Millennia, and now this is the second time that banishment, at least the second time that I can recall, that banishment has been mentioned as opposed to like banished zone. So there you go. This is the intended way, like I said, to summon Dark Guardian. This allows you to essentially summon him, any Gate Guardian actually, from your deck or extra deck and ignore summoning conditions. So you can bring Dark Guardian out with this, but you do have to have a different Gate Guardian in your graveyard. There's a couple of ways of doing it. You could do it with extra Foolish Burial, send one of the extra deck ones there. You could do it with regular Foolish Burial and send the original Gate Guardian if you were playing that in your particular Gate Guardian deck. But it's still not like great. I played it 1 in here, and I played it 1 in my physical deck for this archetype as well, just because you can search it. You do need to go into the extra deck to find a spell searcher, but you can search it, and then you can do it that way. But the condition is difficult to meet. Like, you don't want to have a Gate Guardian in the graveyard. You'd rather have it on the field. And I mean, once you have a Gate Guardian on field, especially if you have combined, you can just get Dark Guardian and special summon him that way. You'd probably almost be better off playing 2 Dark Guardians and no Dark Elements. But the nice thing with Dark Element is it eliminates the fact that he's not searchable by any means, really. He is just kind of stuck in your deck until you hard draw him. But that's why 3 Pot of Prosperities are in here, because the deck is bricky and you want consistency. And I mean, hey, in a deck like this, what's another brick in the wall? You can also play, there's the other spell, it's not in my list, but you can play Ryoku Guardian. If your opponent's, its effect is that if your life points are lower than your opponent's, you can target a monster you control with Gate Guardian in its original name, half your opponent's life points, then that monster gains attack equal to your opponent's life points. And then you can also do the search effect, or the placement effect that a lot of the Gate Guardian cards have. It's just the deck's OTK machine. I mean, this deck is not quite what I'd call like a true like blind going second OTK machine. Like, it's just not consistent enough for it. It can get a big beater on the field via Ryoku Guardian, but it's not great. So the next is all just non-engine. You've got 3 Ash. You could probably change that with 3 Imperm, 3 Droll, 3 Ash. Like, I have 3 Ash, 3 Dimension Shifter, because part of the only way this deck is going to function is by creating a lot of disruption going second. And Dimension Shifter is it. You could probably play, if you play Droll and Dimension Shifter, the only thing is if you discard Droll, you can't get Dimension Shifter, or you activate Dimension Shifter after the fact. But Shifter is probably enough to stop your opponent from doing a ton of stuff on their first turn. Foolish Burial is here just because it's helpful to get some of these Gate Guardians into the graveyard, because they can be banished from there for some of the extra deck plays. And then 3 Pot of Frost, just because you're dealing with a bricky deck, it's helpful to have those. All right, so now we get into the cool stuff. The retrained Gate Guardians themselves. Gate Guardians combined. Song of the Thunder, Kazujin, and Suijin. These are all contact fusions. You do not need a spell card for these. Must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards from your hand, field, and or graveyard. When your opponent activates a card effect that targets a card you control, quick effect, you can negate that effect, and if you do destroy that card, you can only use this effect thrice per turn. If this face-up card leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 level 11 or lower Gate Guardian from your deck or extra deck, ignoring summon conditions. So 2 things. It floats, but it does not float into Dark Guardian. He's level 12, so you can't use him to float into Dark Guardian. Too bad. 2, but it will float into any of the other fusions, any of the, or the original Gate Guardian. The thrice targeting protection is valuable. The only thing is it's targeting, so it's not like a true Omni Negate. Like, if your opponent just opens Raigeki on you, he can't stop that. That's not targeting. Field spells that search, he can't just negate and destroy those. So Gate Guardians combined, I mean, he's still 3750 beat stick. The aesthetic is cool. I think Gate Guardians combined, like the card art is awesome. I like how it kind of highlights the 3 elemental aspects of the 3 Gate Guardians, with like the lightning at the top for lightning up here. You got the wind, and then Suijin. I think this would look sweet in like a prismatic secret rare or something. The super rare doesn't do it justice, but I think it's a really cool card. The nice thing about him too that he has over the others is that the other 3 fusion monsters can only be special summoned by banishing the cards you control. So whether they're in your back row or your front row, but they need to be cards you control. You can't do it from the hand, and you can't do it from the graveyard. With him, you can pretty much do it. If you drew all 3 Gate Guardians at once, you could just do that. You could banish all 3, get Gate Guardian combined out. Whereas the others need to be controlled. So that's a little bit, it's more restrictive, obviously. And that's kind of a part of the deck where it's like, okay, well, now you're like, do you play like 3 of them and desperately try to like RNG yourself into a Gate Guardians combined just on draw luck? Probably not the best way to do it. But yeah, moving on to the 2 first, the 2 of 3s, Gate Guardian of Water and Thunder. Must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above cards you control once per chain. Quick effect, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, changes attack to 0 until the end of this turn. You can use this effect twice per turn. So if this face-up card leaves the field because of an opponent's card, destruction, any form of like removal, essentially, you can special summon a Suijin or Sangha from your banished zone. So, or from banishment. So, yeah. Again, it's a battle trick. It's very similar to the battle trick that the base materials have. He floats into his base materials when he's destroyed. That's kind of a thing with all of the miniature Gate, or the 2 of 3s. They all flow into one of, you can choose whichever one of the materials you used for it. And that's about it. Gate Guardian of Thunder and Wind. must be special summoned again with cards you control. During your main phase, you can add a spell trap from your deck to your hand that mentions Sangha of the Thunder, Kazajin, and Suijin. Has to mention all three. You can only use this effect once per turn. If this card is, again, special summoned, you can bring back, it floats into Sangha or Kazajin. So this is your spell searcher. This can search out Dark Element. This can search out Double Attack. It can also search out Labyrinth. Wall Shadow. You're probably going to search out Wall Shadow with this guy, but you can do it with that as well. But yeah, he's your spell searcher. It's nice, I guess, to have access to spell searching automatically just by going into the extra deck. Probably be more useful in a retrained Sangha, Kazajin, or Suijin, but hey, I'm not a card designer. And the final of the minis is Gate Guardian of Wind and Water. This is probably the one you're going to summon the most. It is a spell negate twice per turn, spell trap or effect, spell trap card or effect negation. So the nice thing with this is he's a negate, but he's not destruction. So if you have a continuous spell or trap or a field spell that you're having a hard time dealing with and you negate it, well, it's still going to be there. It's still going to be a problem. So that's kind of the miss with Gate Guardians of Wind and Water. Still useful, but not as powerful as it might sound at first. And then we just have Nightmare Unicorn, Nightmare Phoenix. It's just kind of, cheap SP Little Knight. SP is probably obviously the main deck one you'd want to have, or the extra deck one you'd want to have, but if you have $100, I guess, to burn on this game. And then you have Dracosac, because you're making level 7s, and he's not bad for that. Big Eye, again, you're making level 7s, and he's fairly useful for that. And Shangri-Ra. Shangri-Ra is, it's in here. It does give you access to your Kashtiras. You're not going to probably use it a ton, but it's not the end of the world. And it does only require 2 level 7s. So if you couldn't, for some reason, get like Kazajin material or Suijin or stuff for your fusions, you could go into Shangri-Ra as an alternative plan. It's like, let's say you hard drew into a Labyrinth, Heavy Tank and Fenrir, or Scareclaw Cash and Castiriosis or something like that. You could discard the Castiriosis, special the Scareclaw Cash, normal summon your Heavy Tank, Igzy summon Shangri-Ra, and then at least you would have an ability to special summon on your opponent's standby phase, something like Fenrir or Unicorn, and kind of get things going that way. It's an option. Maybe not the most powerful way to do it, but it's an option. All right, so that is the short and sweet of this kind of strange little brew. Again, I don't think this is going to be something that you're going to take to, a YCS or a regionals or particularly competitive locals and really win with. But I think right now we're kind of going into a tier 0 meta. I think it's fun to just, experiment with stuff that's frankly quite cheap outside of Fenrir, and you don't necessarily need to play 3 Fenrir. You can play 3 other non-engines instead. Unicorn is super cheap. Everything else is available in like multiple reprints outside of the fusions. The fusion Gate Guardian monsters are probably the cards you'd have the hardest time getting right now. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. You don't have to. You actually really like it, but it does, it's nice for me. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.